So this is Michael Manjos, Chairman of the Board of Finance. It is 6:06 still, Thursday, March 26th, and we're starting our Board of Finance electronic meeting for our budget workshop. Dialed in on our screen is John O, Vice Chairman, Steve Kirsch, Rebecca, Dane, and Craig. So all the members of the board are here. Ron Bonowski is on as well, and we have a few other public participations. Ken as well is here. So if everybody could confirm that they're there on the line, one by one on the board. So John O.
Hey, Mike, I'm here.
Great. Craig?
I'm here.
Rebecca?
I'm here.
Steve?
I'm here.
And Dane?
Hello, present.
Perfect. So we are going to ask, I hereby declare this meeting to order and that we have a quorum. The agenda is up on the screen that everybody can see and is posted. This public meeting is being conducted remotely in compliance with Section 1 of Government Vermont's Executive Order 7D, dated March 14th, 2020, using GoToMeeting electronic conference technology. Using this technology, the public should participate in real time by their computer, tablet, smartphone, or telephone, using the access information set forth on the meeting agenda. Please be advised that each meeting has unique participation information, so please be assured you have access to the correct meeting. Notice is hereby given that only 250 participants may access this remote electronic public meeting at one time. Access to this meeting using this technology is granted solely by the technology provider on a first access basis and is not controlled by the town of Monroe. While it is anticipated we will not exceed this participant limit for this meeting, should it appear we are approaching said limit so that any member of the public is denied access to this meeting, I, as chairman, reserve the right to adjourn and continue the meeting at a later date using technology appropriate to ensure all members of the public may participate. Please take notice of the following regarding this remote electronic public meeting. This meeting is being conducted in real time. This meeting is open to the public. That any member of the public may listen or view this meeting anonymously. That this meeting is being recorded. And now, while we ask you to mute your microphones unless recognized to speak, that anything you say, do, or displayed on your screen maybe become part of the recording. That the recording shall be posted to the town website within 7 days. That the recording should be made available to the public within a reasonable time in town hall upon written request. The meeting should have standard parliamentary procedures. However, I ask participants to follow these special rules. In addition, please mute your microphone so as to reduce background noise at any time you are not speaking. Prior to speaking on each occasion, each speaker should clearly state their name and title for the record. The use of the chat feature is prohibited and will not be considered during the meeting if in use. As set forth in the agenda, this meeting will not feature public participation. I think that's everything we have to cover. All right. So, thanks for putting up with all of our fun, and now we can get to work. So, obviously, we are here to talk about the budget workshop. It's only been a week since we met, but obviously the world's changing as we speak hourly. So we've gotten a lot of input from different people. We've been speaking to everybody I can think of in sight as to what's coming down. Just a couple of house cleaning issues. I'm sure most people are aware of it, but the governor did change the process for budget approvals in the state of Connecticut. Ken's going to speak to that so we can touch on so everybody's clear on what we're dealing with now. Ken?
Okay, thank you, Mike. This is First Selectman Kellogg speaking. So as I know I did inform this board quickly via a message earlier when this first came out. One of the governor's executive orders, 7I, basically, and I will, I'm going to actually summarize the impact in that order, which was actually prepared by our town attorney after I had asked him to confirm our understanding of it. So it's, Item number 13 in that order compels the legislative body, which is of course the town council in Monroe, that in lieu of holding a budget referendum, it compels the town council to authorize the budget-making authority, which is the Board of Finance in our town, to adopt a budget for the 2020-21 fiscal year and to set a mill rate sufficient to pay the expenses and absorb any revenue deficit. The Board of Finance must hold at least one public meeting and shall take all reasonable steps to publicize the draft budget and to receive public comments thereon, including publishing draft budgets on the town website and providing an email address and or the public means to submit comments to the Board of Finance before the vote. If there was any questions relative to that, happy to entertain it. I know that some of the things that we are working on IT already to set up a generic email address for future budget input from the public. I know that I've received some already. I think some board members have already. Again, I would just caution board members to not reply to all or engage in a conversation over email that would be considered a meeting under FOI. The intent of that I would presume that you would act as if all those comments were, matters of public participation. Obviously, nothing would preclude you from contacting a member of the public as any elected official and having a conversation with them individually. I just don't want to have conversations with the entire board or a quorum of the board outside of a properly noticed meeting. So we're in the process of setting up that generic email address, and I've asked that it's set up so that when you will receive that input, it will go to the entire Board of Finance as well as the staff here, so that everyone's receiving the information at the same time. So we are working on that. The other thing I am working on with the town attorney is preparing for further discussions and contemplation of a resolution by town council, which will provide the required, basically complying with the order, basically, where the town council has to authorize the Board of Finance to finalize the budget. So we are working on that. There are some questions relative to schedule that we're still working out. There were some things that a prior governor's order clearly moved certain dates out 1 month. There's still a question as to some of the milestone dates, even though we're past some of those, but we will get clarity on all of that in a few days, early next week, I would assume, and we will endeavor to get out what we believe might be a good starting point for discussion for how to move forward. But ultimately, the council would have to
set the date,
sign off
right,
and finalize the dates, yes. So I guess that's that. Unless there's
Ken,
any
this
questions.
is Rebecca. I have one question. For the generic email and the public participation, is there like a start and end date to that?
The public participation, we will have a public hearing. We'll discuss dates tonight. I was assuming once we got this technology up and working, we could make an attempt to have that. I was thinking in 2 weeks, just to start taking for the public hearing. We can take emails till the end of time. There's no reason to stop or put a limit on it that I can see.
Okay.
As things develop and change, people's opinions might change, so I'm open to taking opinions till we have a vote.
Okay.
I'm fine with that from public. If, anytime somebody wants to put something in writing and send it in, I think we should be willing to look at it.
And Mike, this is Craig. And for Board Finance, what happens to those emails? Do we respond? What is the process with that?
There's no requirement. I would assume what I'm going to do.
That question, we just say our name every time.
Right, it's Mike Manjos.
It's the governor's order.
No problem. Basically, what I would assume we will do is, based on feasibility, read them in during the public hearing. So it'll be on the record as well. If individual board members choose to respond or want to ask questions, they're certainly welcome to. When I, in the past, have gotten feedback from the members of the public, I usually directly respond just to let them know that, it's heard and listened to, but that's an optional thing. But again, if anybody individually or collectively wants to, on an individual basis, respond, they are more than welcome to. There's no limits on your interaction with public. So feel free to whatever you're comfortable with. But Joe, I will respond myself to everyone that comes in, just to make sure that somebody does. But everybody is welcome to do it individually or collectively or however, we just can't create it into a meeting thing. So do it individually and we're very safe. But we will read them into the record when we do the public hearing.
Yeah. Okay. Ken Kellogg, I think that's perfectly fine. I think it would be appropriate for the chair to at least acknowledge every message. And then, depending upon what you receive, another option would also be, what you could also, reduce all of those to one packet as well, and have that available too for a future meeting. And you can put those up on a website too. So.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. No, there's no reason not to.
Plenty of options. Yep.
Exactly. Plenty of options. And again, we want to make this is obviously a difficult situation. This is obviously not without its challenges. It's going to put a lot of pressure on this board. But I think we also need to be as open and communicative with everybody in town that we can be. I'm speaking to every other board on a regular basis. I'm speaking to Ken pretty much daily, Ron and Heidi. So, we're communicating as much as possible. But we also have time now. So the biggest difference, when we spoke last week, one of our concerns with pushing back the time frame was, what if we run into a problem with the budget getting passed, then we get up against the time frame on getting tax bills out in a timely manner. Now we will know once we set our final voting date, then it's done and we can go. So we can, council, I'm sure, is going to set the schedule of when it has to be finalized by, and then we'll back in our schedule accordingly. But it will give us more time, like we had spoken about last week. We expect insurance numbers third week of April. We can certainly now wait for that. Because my assumption is it will be early May. We'll be finalizing now. But again, anything we're doing now, in my humble opinion, is early because we're in a very fluid situation. We're not under a time deadline. So while I want us to consider options, I want us to look at issues that we can foresee coming up. There's no need for us to make any rash decisions at this point. The town is functioning as best as possible, obviously with limited public coming, but we do have ability to do timing. The main thing I wanted to talk about tonight, besides, when we want to collectively meet again, is, where we see issues on the revenue side. Because I think we will have some challenges based on what we know today. But I want to talk some of those things through with everybody. And then also just reassure everybody on how we're looking for this year on the revenue side. Because again, obviously, if we have a big shortfall this year, it'll affect some of the decisions we make going forward. So anybody else thoughts and concerns? And everybody's very quiet.
No, this is Rebecca. I share the same concerns. I think, my thoughts go to the revenue, the impact that we're experiencing now just due to the pandemic and, making sure that we're being as planful as we can.
Correct. Anybody else?
This is Craig. Just agreed on everything you went through.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, it's John.
Anything
I
else?
agree with everything you said too.
Okay. Steve, anything else?
No, I agree.
Dane? Anything on your side, Dane?
Sorry, I was muted. Agreed.
No problem. Okay. So basically, primarily, if everybody's got a budget book in front of them, on our revenue side, Obviously, the primary revenue driver is property taxes.
Mike,
I
please
think
call out pages.
page 19.
And you can mention it's on the website for anyone who doesn't have
Right.
a budget book.
And it is, again, it's electronically on the website as well, if anybody wants to look at it there. So basically, at the last meeting, we had discussed with the tax collector, looking into if we could get any kind of a projection on basically what I'm looking for is, let's make the assumption that there's a number of people who are going to be affected by this situation, and it might affect people's ability to pay taxes. So I was looking for a breakdown of how many people get paid by escrow, which obviously has been getting escrowed for the last 9 months. So it should be less impacted than if somebody has to just make that payment on their own. So I'm hoping we can get those kind of detailed numbers. I think we also are going to have to look at personal property taxes at a very different rate, because obviously big businesses are dramatically affected. Obviously, there'll be some relief, it sounds like, from this bill that just got passed. I haven't dove into all the details, but there's obviously things that can be applied for. But
Yeah.
I'm also thinking of the possibility that the governor might, in his wisdom, decide to provide extensions for due dates on taxes, or could, it's a possibility that we might have to think about. I spoke to Ron as well, and I asked him to kind of model us out a cash flow analysis of, historically where our cash flows run month by month. We looked at it a couple of days ago, I think with Pat as well. The lowest point we've kind of hit in the last couple of years was about $20 million. So, we certainly never really get terribly low on our cash supply. So my feeling on that is, even if it's delayed a couple of months, while it might put a little strain on the cash flow, I don't expect it to be something that would make us have to make a decision in any way, shape, or form. Otherwise, except for possibly looking at adjusting our interest calculation.
Mike, this is John. What the 20 million you said is the lowest point? How many months would that cover the expenses?
Well, I mean, if we do quick math on a $91 million budget, 8 million a month, 2.5 months probably, on the back of a napkin in my head.
Yeah.
Okay, no, sounds good.
Would be better,
You know what I mean? Ron might be able to jump in on that too, but I mean, the way I also look at it, I mean, we always talked about the fund balance being, in the range of a month to 2 months. And with the cash flows that come in, so I think that probably makes about as much sense. And again, that would assume you're taking in zero. And I don't see that. Go ahead, Craig, you start. Somebody started to say something there. I didn't mean to cut anybody off.
Hey, Mike, this is Ron.
Yes.
I didn't. That wasn't me, but I can jump in real quick. Yeah, you're 2.5 to 3 months.
Okay.
That you were right there.
And I'm assuming that would. I mean, again, I don't expect we'll be at a zero revenue situation at all. I think what's going to happen is you're going to have whatever percentage of people who have their taxes escrowed, we're going to get paid. And then you'll have certainly an adjustment factor made.
Mike, this is Steve. So you've
Yes.
got your $20 million low point, and that's your collections, and you've got the undesignated fund balance that would carry you for some other period of time to fill that missing gap. Correct?
Yeah, Ken Kellogg, the undesignated fund balance.
It's in that number.
included
It's in
the
that,
general
yeah.
fund,
I mean,
Okay.
that's a cash balance.
Okay.
So it's not on top of that.
Okay.
So basically, again, one of the things I always wanted to put in people's heads, and I think we'll need to map this out kind of on a month-by-month basis, is we're not talking about anything here until July. So, we're talking about payments that are coming in June 30th. So now we're at March, let's say we're at March 30th for round numbers. You've got April, May, June. You've got a 3-month window before any of this comes into play. I am not certainly an expert on anything, but I would hope, based on understanding of the situation that's occurred in Hong Kong pretty well, because we have offices there, that you'll be a relative, you'll get some normalcy back, and certainly by that point. Now, I'm not saying that all problems are over, but, the town in general, I would hope, will be functioning at some level. And certainly, we're not going to be at a zero revenue play ever. So I think what we're going to map out, what I'm going to ask, or I think we should ask for, but again, this is what I want feedback on, is, what if we took a 10% hit? What if we took a 20% hit? What if we took a 30% hit? I mean, we're doing cash flow modeling right now in my business because, we're going to assume we're taking, we're kind of running a 30 and 50% off model. And what does our cash flow look like for the next 4 months? And it's a very similar thing I want to do here. I want us to look at presently what we've taken in from revenue for this year, what our typical revenues are April, May, June, where we're going to see hits. I mean, obviously, the town clerk's not going to generate all the revenue they did because I don't think a lot of people are out buying a house tomorrow. I think Parks and Rec's going to take some hits, but that doesn't necessarily affect that much because it goes into the funds.
Ken Kellogg, a lot of that is program fund revenue. There's certainly some that is not, but there's also costs that go against that. So you can scale back costs if necessary.
Right. But I want us to look at every revenue source that we have.
We can certainly do that.
And then model out what our options are. And if nothing else, just to go through the exercise, but also to reassure people, because I believe that what we're going to find is the majority of our revenue for this year is in. The tax collector can jump in, but I know.
Yeah,
Deb, are you there?
Deb should be on.
She was there.
Teresa, can you unmute her line?
Unmute.
We're going to turn it on.
She gets her.
She says Debbie, wasn't she?
Yeah.
She's gone.
She's gone? We lost her already. Okay.
Let's call her 8. Let's see. Unmute caller 8 and ask if it's Debbie.
Mike, this is Steve. Can I
Yes.
ask a question? I think of the first selectman. How will the next 3 months, do we have any view of what might be happening in terms of the police special duty fund? In terms of income coming in between now and the end of this fiscal year?
Ken Kellogg, I don't have that at my fingertips. I can certainly get some updates from PD. I mean, the special duty fund is, has always been pretty, healthy.
Very healthy. Yeah.
We actually have a lot of projects earmarked to use that as a funding source currently and for the next fiscal year. I mean, certainly there could be some projects that might impact those requests for service, but you got to remember, construction is identified as an essential service. We are still processing road opening permits. Any kind of road jobs that we would certainly have those resources, unless of course we're operating in a different environment. But as of right now, there's no restrictions on road jobs or anything like that. So, with that said, I don't know off the top of my head, Steve, what special duty schedules may have existed from now to the end of the fiscal year and where they stand, but I'd be happy to ask the chief to get us that.
But I think the other thing to keep in mind
is, you covered my main question is if those jobs are still largely going on, then hopefully there won't be a significant impact. But
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly permitted to occur, whether or not, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't predict whether there could be a job here or there that has been canceled by the.
Oh, I'm sure there will be. But again, keep in mind, Steve, that revenue is not spent for operating.
Correct.
So
No,
it doesn't
I
affect our
understand that.
operating budget. What it might affect is the fund going forward. But it's got a healthy balance in the fund already, so it's not a direct budget impact. And I think what you're going to find is a lot of these things, similar to Parks and Rec, a lot of their revenues go to fund programs they run.
Correct.
So if the program's not being run and the revenue doesn't come in, it really doesn't affect very much. It's not being used to pay their regular budget.
Right. The biggest, Ken Kellogg, the biggest impact for something like that, Parks and Rec, would be if you're not running a program that typically generates a little bit more revenue than it collects, you may not be able to put on another program that usually runs at a deficit, so to speak. So classic example would be like the summer concert series. We use the program fund for that, but we don't charge any free concerts. So that's
Correct.
a pure cost. So those are the types of things that are typically funded through other programs.
Correct.
That said, God willing, if we can have a summer concert series this year, which I hope
we could probably all use it.
We could all use it. So I'm hoping we can, and there are funds there to run that if we're allowed to by the time we get there. God, I hope so, right?
God, I hope so. Yes, but yes, that'll certainly be a gathering of more than 10 people. Yes.
Hey, Mike, this is Ron.
Ron, yes.
So on page 21, there is we do budget money coming out of the police private duty into the general fund operating budget, and typically that number is 100,000. We actually haven't needed it the past few years. We did budget 200,000 this year though.
And what is in the fund at this point? Do you know?
I can look that up.
I believe it was Ken Kelly. I believe it was in the millions.
Yeah, it was.
That's what I thought too. But I just want everybody
pretty healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I just. That's
with a footnote, there are several capital items that were earmarked to come out of that have not yet hit.
But again, it's one of those funds we're not running certainly close on.
No.
And that's the nice thing over the last few years is we have definitely been conservative in our budgeting, not only of the regular budget and had overages to build the general fund, but we've also been very conservative on using revenue from the other funds. So our funds are healthy at this point. So if we lose 3 or 6 months worth of revenue into those funds, we're not going to run into a place where we're looking at a deficit or anything serious. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my first page for a second, which was 19. We just talked a little bit about property taxes. I think licenses and permits is another place that we will definitely could certainly be looking at some kind of an adjustment there because, again, some of this stuff is getting deferred. Yeah. Will it get picked up? I think we might see a drop for this year that might carry forward into July, August, September instead. I don't think anybody's doing a lot of building projects right now, and that might get pushed back a couple of months. But again, that might not affect next year's budget. Because
Kellogg, I mean, I think there certainly will be some decrease. We have to expect that, particularly, people that simply just don't want to perhaps spend the money to move their project forward.
Yeah,
but
uncertainty.
Again,
right
all projects, commercial and residential construction and building and all the trades are considered essential. So, all those projects can continue. We are processing those things. We are getting permits out. We are taking the revenue for those permits when they come in. We have special procedures set up with drop boxes and things like that. So it's done safely, but yeah, I mean, to expect there will be some downturn in that activity, I think makes sense. But as you said, I would hope it is more of a deferral of projects that people decide to hold off on whatever,
I was
whatever
gonna-
it is, and then they pick it up later on. So,
Yeah, I think that's what we could see a lot of. So, I mean, again, while we may see things move from, this year to possibly next year, fiscal year, just because of that. So I think a lot of the things in the town clerk's budget might hit those kind of categories. The places where I was more concerned, obviously, funding from the state. I did have a conversation today with our rep, because we do have one more ECS payment due this year that's supposed to be coming in shortly. And he assured me that there has been nothing going on that would change any of that. They are concerned about possibly looking at a deficit for the end of the year now, at the state level, which wouldn't surprise because, I listened to the governor of New York this morning say that, they're expecting a $10 to $15 billion revenue hit. So I can't imagine we're going to come away unscathed with the bump in employment and the bump in, there's a lot of things that will be affected. Sales taxes obviously are not going to be the same kind of revenue. So while I don't think there's a risk for this year, it's something I do want to talk about going forward. Because again, that's a big risk factor as far as I'm concerned. But it's something we need to discuss going forward. ECS funding for next year.
Ken Kellogg, yeah, I've been on, there's more than one call a week that I have that the governor participates on, and there's been no discussion, no hint of any reduction in municipal aid. Obviously, I would scream from the rafters to let you know that if that were the case. I have not heard any of that, and I've had similar conversations with our state rep, and there's been no discussion in terms of any current perceived risk on ECS or any of your other grants.
Right. Okay. Interest in dividends. Obviously, that is a place that I think we are safe to assume is a big risk. I mean, we had a spectacular year this year. Our town treasurer reminds us all the time. He did a great job. We've beaten the revenue numbers already, which is great. So we have no concern with this year. Obviously, with the rate environment as it is, I mean, I'm sure most of you heard yesterday, short-term rates went negative yesterday for the first time in history. I don't expect that's something that'll last again forever, but certainly for the next 6 to 9 months, I would assume we're going to be in a very, very low rate environment, which could make interest revenue difficult, to say the least. I would assume, again, making assumptions, but we're going to have to make some kind of assumptions that, 9 months from now, I think, God willing, we're going to be back to some sort of normalcy. So, yeah, we may have a half a year hit on interest. That could be difficult, but I do not expect it's going to be to zero forever. No, I don't think he is. So, again, I don't know anybody else's thoughts on, that, but it's another area where I think we're going to have to take a hard look at. Then the last piece, again, is less of a revenue side, but more just of we're trying to understand the financing and finances of the Board of Ed. I have spoken to them a couple of times. They do not have a lot of clarity yet as to times, dates, whether they'll be going back. I mean, the governor did make a comment the other day on one meeting that, he didn't think we'll be going back this year, which I think shocked a lot of people.
He did,
including my wife.
Ken Kellogg, he did clarify that in a subsequent call that he was, he was not intending to foreshadow anything. He was simply saying that
could happen.
It's certainly a scenario that they're planning for.
Right.
But at this point, April 20th is the new date in the latest executive order. So that's the current date they're operating under.
What's the latest date, was it?
April 20th.
April 20th, that's what I thought,
current date, the latest executive order relative to school.
Right. And again, I'm sure other people have kids in college, but mine are both home till at least that date at this point. One of them got, he was supposed to be going to the end of the March and got pushed back till basically the end of April. And we're 99% sure the college kids are not going back, because literally it would be 2 weeks later they'd be being sent out.
And if I could just, Ken Kellogg, if I could just jump in, something I should have mentioned in my earlier comments, but I didn't think of this until just now. But I should have also just clarified for everyone, in case there was any question or concern in this regard, one of the governor's orders does make it clear that the municipal budget making authority, i.e. the Board of Finance, in adopting a budget this year, absent a referendum, does not open the door to any kind of line item authority on the Board of Ed's budget. It's still one number appropriation. The Board of Ed retains all their authority relative to line items. Nothing has changed in that regard. I just want to make sure that was
Everybody's clear,
crystal
right?
clear on that, because I guess I actually haven't heard anything in this community, but I think there's been some questions in other communities, and the governor's order is pretty clear on that.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is, again, fortunate or unfortunate, sometimes this these situations bring out the best and the worst in people, and people try to take advantage of situations. And obviously, I think the biggest thing is, yes, we know there's going to be issues, yes, but we really don't know that much at this point, because none of us have ever been through this. But again, I do come back to the fact that there are other places in the world that are on the other side of the curve, as they say. So I do not foresee, or if I had to be a betting man, that, this is certainly not going to ruin our entire next year. And this is what we're talking about right now. So, we're talking about, a year from now, I don't foresee we're going to be dealing with this unless it really rears back again the second time. So we've got to always keep in the back of our head, but even though there are cries to, shut down everything, cut everything, get rid of everything, this is not the time, in my opinion, for draconian measures. This is the time to just be measured, be cautious, be careful. I know Ken shared with me that, they did send a memo out that any unnecessary expenses are obviously not going to be made at this point. We'll put a freeze in.
I've already, Ken Kellogg, I've already issued a directive that any current year spending that is in any way discretionary, meaning not required for operations, and not obviously we're not going to do anything that would impact public health, public safety, employee health, whatever. But anything that is really can be delayed at this time shall be. So that was my clear directive earlier this week to our department heads.
Okay. And Ron, I know you're still there. Have you had any further developments on the Board of Ed side with any clarity since the last time we spoke on? I know obviously teachers are still working, albeit remotely, but I'm sure there are other places that are building related, and transportation obviously we spoke about, and other areas that there has to be some, savings that are going to be felt, hopefully to catch up somewhat on our deficit.
Yeah, Mike, this is Ron. So yeah, some of the things we're still working through the contracts on. So I don't want to speak to those at this point. There are definitely going to be some other savings. Obviously, some non-contractual stuff, just running the buildings and maintenance around, whether it be grass cutting or whatever, we'll be able to, save through now and the end of the year. There's going to also be some added costs with the distance learning. But net, yes, there should be a savings. A lot of that's going to be dependent upon, if we come, how much of it's going to be dependent upon if we come back at all.
Right. And again, I'm hoping in 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, we'll have a much better feel for that. We would hope. I mean, again, obviously, in the last week, I feel like the world's a very different place. So I'm hoping
It is, Ken Kellogg. And I think, part of the challenge with all this is that, there is not a lot of, obviously one of the calls we spend time with, at least once a week, is with the state epidemiologist. And, one of the things he's always made clear is we don't have, there's not a lot of good models built for this, because they can base things off of seasonal influenza or even novel strains of influenza like H1N1, but this, it's similar, but it's still not influenza. And the other thing is, it's very difficult to model in all these social distancing measures that have been put into place, because
they've never been done.
They're unprecedented.
Correct.
So
I mean, when have you seen the airline shut down like this?
Right.
When have you
So,
seen the subway?
I guess the one thing I would just, mention as relates to, the time horizon you're talking about, right, is you got to remember that all of these measures that are being put in place are deliberately put to extend the period of, of the wave of illness, to kind of, it's to flatten the curve, right, to lower the number of cases, but it's also spread it out over time so that the impact to our healthcare system is not as severe. So to some extent, all the great things we're doing to save lives, and will also by default, make this wave of illness, it's going to take a little bit longer. So
correct.
That's just the reality. In terms of knowing where we're going to be a few weeks from now. Yeah.
Right. All right. What else does anybody have concerns on? Things we should be looking at? What are we missing here? I mean, feel free. Certainly, I don't have all the answers here. I've certainly done a lot of thinking about it and talking with people. But please, anybody who's got any other thoughts, now is the time to throw them out there, because we've got some time to dig into the numbers if we need to look at scenarios if we need to. I just want to basically map out a plan of what we'll need going forward.
Yeah, so this is Rebecca, and Ken kind of, touched on it with the discretionary spend. I guess one thing I'm doing in my work is, are there projects that can be deferred, or,
right,
delayed and that sort of thing. So I think on the expense side, as much as I, had concerns on the revenue side, it's more or less, are we doing this all at the right time? So, and protecting our cash flow. So that would just be my other, if there's any projects that were scheduled, if they could be delayed, and do we want to delay them?
Well, I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, the major thing that comes up in my head, certainly at springtime, is roads.
Correct. I mean, that's
really to me, that's the first thing that pops into my head is a major spend.
Yeah, there were
seasonally.
I mean, there were some Ken Kellogg, there were some projects that have already, gone out, purchase orders, I think. So we have a couple of trucks and vehicles that the purchase orders are already issued.
Right.
So we're not going to do anything there. But yeah, I mean, those are certainly things that can be looked at. And if they're not, related to safety issues or keeping the operations running, we should take a hard look at it. And
right.
And
no, I think it's absolutely true. And what was the other thing? Another thing that was on my list was I don't see any benefit at this point to having a capital meeting because I just, I'm certainly not of the, appetite to, greenlight a lot of big projects right now until we get a better grasp of where we're going. So again, to me, I don't know if it's the right approach, but certainly pushing the can down the road until we have a little more clarity makes a lot of sense to me, unless somebody tells me I'm crazy.
No, that's where I'm at, just because there's so much variable right now. But, and just putting it out there on the table, like, hey, we're not saying no. We're just saying, let's make sure it's the right time.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, So this is Craig. That's what I was going to bring up, was the capital and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm on the same page where we need to take a hard look at it. And I understand that we need to kind of, maybe we have time that we can wait and see. So, but I agree with that.
Ken Kellogg, one of the things I was going to bring up, I know I've discussed this with Ron and Heidi and with Mike a little bit, but and we also need to have a discussion with town council on this as well, because their discussion on capital kind of got preempted as well by all of this. So we need to have a conversation that all of council is included in, and they get to. I would actually like them to affirmatively either vote or make sure they're part of a meeting of Board of Finance to make sure they're in concurrence with all this. But I think, we may need to be creative this year with capital, and that, we have to remember that the way our system works, we don't spend $1 in bonding without going to a town meeting anyway.
Right.
So, we could certainly budget from a debt service perspective a dollar amount of what we might be willing to do, but we don't necessarily.
Because again, we're assuming this is a year. I mean, really, typically we typically bond in the spring of the following year. So we're looking a year out.
Right. So you can basically have almost a global placeholder, knowing that every project is going to get vetted later on, but you've got it covered in debt service. The only thing that I would really think that we would have to make sure that is agreed upon in the actual adopted budget is anything that would be coming out of grants, police private duty, capital reserve. If it's, those are the types of things that, we just want to make sure that you've got those funding sources locked up. But you could certainly, all of those things could be put into place with the ability to. You have the framework there, but knowing that you're probably not going to make decisions and actually
put a shovel in the ground.
Actually start a project until we're on much firmer ground.
Yeah, my thought process today was to, instead of looking to do a capital meeting in a week or two, to do it in a month. You know what I mean? Because again, I don't think now that we've got more runway, certainly in a month from now, we're going to have a much better feeling of where we're at and know what our appetite might be. Unless somebody has a strong objection, I'm going to suggest that to council that we push our joint meeting back at least a few, 3 weeks to a month from now.
I personally think that makes a lot of sense.
Does everybody think that makes sense? Any issues with that? That I'm not
saying? John, I agree. That makes perfect sense to do that.
Okay. Craig agrees. So I will. Great. Rebecca, I'm assuming you're good. Yeah. Great.
Yes.
So I will reach out to the chair. You're good, Steve?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll reach out to the town council chair and make sure they agree, and then get back to you. And then again, back to our schedule. We did have something planned for next week. I'm not convinced we need to do it. I was of the inclination of pushing for 2 weeks, getting back together, unless somebody sees a need to do something in the interim.
And Mike, it's John. Do you want to do 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
Well,
I was thinking
we have next 2 weeks scheduled, right?
We do.
So we can.
But I'm not.
We can just do the week after.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Schedule.
That's what I'm suggesting.
We'll do Thursday 4/9 instead of Thursday 4. Instead of Thursday 4/2.
Right. Does that make sense for everybody?
Well, I was just thinking, this is John, I was just thinking since we've got our meeting on the 16th, if we just tack it onto that, unless we think we're going to know something better in 2 weeks versus 3.
Okay, Kelly, you could leave the 4/9 for now and close.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. But again, why don't we cancel the 4/2, leave the 4/9 for another week, and then we'll see, if we feel like we can certainly take the pulse at that point.
Mike, this is Steve Hirsch. For the 4/9 meeting, I think it might be useful if all of us take the next 2 weeks to come up with all of our questions that we might have on, any of the various items, line items, departments we might have questions of. And then on 4.9, we might use that to talk amongst ourselves and see what it is we want to then turn over to the first selectman and, for him to work on for a future meeting or meetings.
I mean, we could certainly do that. I mean, I want everybody to, be thinking independently on what they see. What I was going to request, and I mean, I talked to Ken about this already today, was what I was going to ask is any department that does generate revenue to give us kind of a review of that revenue and where they could see issues based on what we know today. If they can tell us that, because of what's happened already, they're going to be short revenues this year and then think they might have problems going forward.
Mike, this is Debbie.
Gotcha, Debbie.
I was trying to get in, but my phone wasn't working at home. I just wanted to let you know that about 85% of the taxes are escrowed for the real estate. So we're looking about a half of that will come in. This year is about $28 million will come in July. But we have to remember if they put that off, the banks wait to the last day to pay.
Right.
So it won't be coming in at first start. But I think we, at least that we can project that.
Okay. That's a great number.
Also, I called Allstate today, and they said that there's no problems getting the bills as soon as we set the budget. They are called necessities, and they will be working through the whole thing. So they said there's no issues getting them out as soon as we have a budget.
Right.
And right now, our taxes are lagging about $200,000. But on a positive note, our current taxes were about $8,000 off. So right now, we're looking at as the current taxes coming in. I projected another about $300,000 to $500,000 on the current based on that year. So we are looking pretty good for even if those prior years don't come in.
Okay. So basically, we're not going to have an issue for this year then, which is great to know.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Anybody else have a question for Deb while we got her back here? All right. So like I was saying before, I was gonna, kind of go department by department, see where we have revenue, see what effects could be. Ken will work on that for us and give us a report in 2 or 3 weeks, depending on what we decide. And again, hopefully we'll have a fundamental understanding a little better now. I've spoken to the Board of Ed. Hopefully we'll get a better understanding of savings for this year and any challenges they see going forward, if they have to restart up or if they have to not restart up, or what those effects might be. So we'll see if we can get a report on that. What else do we need to hit, guys?
Okay, so this is Steve. So we're definitely canceling the April 2nd meeting.
4-2, yep. Anybody else have any thoughts that we should hit on, not hit on?
Mike, it's John. I think you've covered everything pretty well. I can't think of anything else that we would have missed.
Rebecca, Steve, John, anybody else? Craig?
My only thoughts, 2008 recession, were there any lessons learned? But it's such a different landscape now that I think
it's very true, because I actually been thinking the same thing, and we've been speaking about it a lot at my office, because we're obviously, in a luxury category that tends to get really hard hit when things like this happen. But I think the biggest feeling is back then, and I remember it like it was yesterday, we didn't know when and if it was going to end.
Right.
We didn't know if it was ever going to come back. I think even if we've seen the last 2 or 3 days in the market, people believe this thing's going to come back. I mean, I can't believe what's happened in the last 3 days. It's crazy to me that suddenly, we're up 15% in 3 days. I mean, doesn't make sense to me, because I don't think we're certainly out of the woods by any means. But obviously there are some people maybe smarter than me who certainly think that. So I think it's important to, again, I've just been trying to dissuade panic and dissuade people thinking we have to do a lot of stuff right now, because we don't. We don't have a cash flow problem.
Correct.
We don't have a medical crisis in our community that we know of yet. The schools seem to be doing a great job dealing with what they've had to deal with. The police are working, the fire department's working, everybody's safe. People seem to be respecting the governor's orders. People seem friendlier when you do see them out a little bit.
Right.
Which I do, I remember that from, 9/11. So I think we just got to keep a positive light on things as much as possible, and try to, when people do come at us with the, you've got to, shut this and cut that and do this and get rid of that. It's like, I think there's a better chance in 3 to 4 months we'll be back to normalcy than we'll be in full crisis mode 6 months from now. And again, that's just my opinion today. It might change with more knowledge coming down the road, but for now, I'm very happy sitting on my hands, making sure everything's just functioning and, everybody's safe. At this point is the most important thing. And, I just don't think we need to do anything dramatic on our end. I think it's happening around us already. So unless I'm missing something dramatic, it's just, town hall seems to be handling what they need to handle, and haven't seen any issues that I can see.
Thanks, Ken Kelly. No, I mean, we're, there's obviously it's a little bit scaled down because, we have far fewer people here at Town Hall. We got a lot of remote work going on. We have no public access to the building, but we are still processing things. Things are still moving forward in terms of, work that has to get done, whether it's our land use departments and building and health and all that other stuff. But we're doing everything to keep to support our businesses and our residents. And obviously a lot of my work is focusing on our public safety. We do there's an awful lot of, planning and work that's being done behind the scenes with a lot of people helping out from emergency management, police, fire, EMS, to make sure we have to be.
The pantry's functioning full speed ahead. I know my wife's been there a lot, so, that's a good thing.
The food pantry
so
is
people are
functioning.
getting taken care of that need it.
Our seniors who need assistance are getting it through the senior center, not physically there, but, through the staff that provide assistance services. And, we're
managing day by day.
Managing day by day, yeah. Again, we don't have any dramatic costs at this point related to the COVID response. Everything's been within budget, but we are tracking everything because at some point there will be some relief program.
Right.
How much, what percent, who knows at this point, but we are tracking everything. But again, at this point, there's no major expenses that have taken place. There's a smattering of things.
Yeah. Monroe is strong. We'll come out. We'll be all right.
Absolutely.
I think so too. All
Hey,
right.
Mike,
Anything?
Chris.
Go ahead.
The question I have is, I know we just had the meeting last week with the Board of Ed, but as you were saying, things could change in 2-3 weeks and 4 weeks, whatever the case may be, and hopefully it is for the better. But is there still, we could go back and revisit the Board of Ed if need be, depending on how the situation may or may not change?
I would assume we're definitely going to. One way or another, we at least want to understand, implications for this year and what they're dealing with, and we'll have better numbers on the medical. So yeah, I fully would intend to have another meeting with them, late April, I would think.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Thanks.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's a great point. And again, I'm in regular contact with Ron, who's over there all the time now. So that's helpful, but I know the superintendent has had his hands full, so I've kind of left him alone for a while. But we'll definitely pick up with him once things settle down. I'll reach out again. I didn't want to really get too much in the way this week. But from everything I hear, distance learning is going on. I mean, it's certainly bumpy at my house, but
I think
we're getting through it.
I think they're doing a good job.
They want to kill each other, exactly. It's unbelievable. But this is a learning experience for sure, if nothing else. All right. Does anybody have anything else?
This is Dan. I think we covered everything I wanted to touch on.
Okay. John, anything else we didn't cover?
No, I don't think so, Mike. You did. I mean, you covered the areas for potential revenue shortfalls. We talked about holding spending. We talked about going back to Board of Ed. I think that's all the big guys. I mean, I'm going through all the line items in the departments. There weren't a lot there. I mean, Ken already did a good job scrubbing a lot of that with his staff. So I can't see that we need to spend a lot of time on any of that.
Okay. Rebecca, Steve, Craig, anything else?
I'm good.
All right. Someone want to make a motion?
Steve will make a motion to adjourn.
Excellent.